everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the editor-in-chief of France's publisher of DC and Variant Image, Boom, and Dark Horse books. It's François Hercouet. Thanks for coming on.
Hi.
So we are recording this in the morning, Alaska time, in the end of the day in France. You have some amazing creators in town in Ramvi and Felipe Andrade doing some mini Deaths to Layla Starr stuff. How was the day for you? Was it a day of being a tour guide, or what was it?
This day was, just I was telling you, we had really great night, in fact, with Felipe and Ram yesterday. And so today was we were, I guess, all recovering from this evening. And Felipe and Ram, they were in Rennes, which is the main city of Brittany, west of France, to begin with their tour, because there will be, I guess, three cities visiting for the French tour. And this is kind of an event, a big event, because we released the Many Deaths of Layla Starr a year ago. It was a blast. It was a huge success, and since the retailers, they really take this book under their wings, and so it's like an evergreen already, a new classic, or a new I guess a new classic book. But we never had a chance, in fact, to get Felipe and Ram all together in France. So this time, a year later, we've been able to do that, and that's really fun. It's pure joy.
I think it's funny, when I was in France in April, when I had lunch with you, I think just a couple days before, I ran into Ram at Paris Fan Festival, and he was doing a signing with Mike Perkins. But it was kind of funny because, obviously Mike Perkins and him did Swamp Thing together. Actually, I guess it was at the Urban Comics booth. And the funny thing about it is I think it was supposed to be a Swamp Thing signing, and I just kept seeing Ram signing Many Deaths of Layla Starr and like drawing little cigarettes on there, like saying something. And I mentioned this to Ram when he was on the podcast. It was really eye-opening to see just how significant the interest in Many Deaths of Layla Starr was in Paris at the time. I mean, or not just at the time, ever since it came out there, it seems.
Yeah. But this book is like some of them, in fact, when you know that when you go beyond, in fact, the core readership, when this book is given or even took by your girlfriend or your father-in-law, and you know that there is something coming up, in fact. And Layla Starr was this kind of book, like Dave Prepper has been, like Saga has been, and it still is. This is the book that is going just beyond it. There is no frontier to this for this kind of book. But yeah, this kind of universality is quite rare, and that's why those books are really precious.
It is interesting to think about that book through the prism of the conversation we had back in April, because if I remember correctly, you told me that one of the realities of being a publisher like Urban is, you're publishing American books quite often in a market that has a deep love for banded designated BD and for manga. And American comics, to some degree, it has a level of trepidation about outside the biggest hits. And I think one thing that's interesting about Layla Starr, and also like we talked about Day Tripper before we started recording, is those are books that strike me as something that originates in the American market, but also has like a ton of overlap with like the BD fans out there. So if you can find a way to kind of get that in their hands, and it becomes that universal hit you're talking about.
Yeah, and we may, I guess that it will be a topic during this podcast, but maybe the format also that we use to adapt the Layla Starr, is like the height of a regular French bande dessinée. So we have this label, this collection, which is called like the big format, big urban, I guess, would be a translation, and just to keep the homothetia, the size. In fact, the dimensions are still like a regular comic book, but we just
stretch it.
Yeah, stretch it, and so, and the fact is that it does work. We did have this big success with the East of West, for instance, which was a series that we already had published, like the whole volumes, and we make this new integral, this new deluxe, I guess, edition, gathering the whole series into only 3 thick book, but under this French bande dessinée format, and it has been rediscovered. So we are really picky about the book that can be adapted into this format, because we feel that some of them, they are the best of the catalog we have, and they would just satisfy, in fact, the sometimes quite demanding French readership when it comes to sci-fi or to horror or fantastic. And we do know that with those kind of books, decorum was also a part of this kind of selection.
Yeah.
We've done it recently with the Righteous First for Vengeance.
Mm-hmm.
Rick Mander and André Lima Aroro. So yeah, we tried to lure, in fact, the French readership to, I guess, American comic books, because there is this strong idea, and it's a pity, but that comics are just, when I say comics, it's US comics. When I will say otherwise bande dessinée or manga, but in France, comics is US comics, but for the majority of the readers, that US comics are only about superheroes. So this is something we have to fight against for, I guess, since the beginning, and even before that, when I was at Delcourt, another French publisher, we had hard time, in fact, to convince a wider audience that the comics, they are as diverse as manga. Now we know that manga is not only a shonen or shoujo and bande dessinée. So we use, in fact, this big format to lure and to I guess to comment est-ce qu'on pourrait dire it's just a Trojan horse, in fact, just to make them read American books, and they don't even know that it's American.
This reminds me of an experience I had. I think I told you about this. It was at Momi Lyon, a shop in Lyon, France. And I walked in there, and there's like 6 shops in a row. It takes up like half of a block on Rue Victor Hugo there. And it was so cool going to each one, but going in the comic one, the comic-centric one, and the BD-centric one, I walked in, and on the left side, there's this big, massive bookcase of books, and it's all, American comics. And then on the right side, it was all BD. And the funny thing is I looked at both of them, and I tell my wife, I'm just like, Amber, this is so funny. One is all American comics, and then you look at the BD one, in the dead center, right in the middle, was an American comic. It was Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips's Pulp. And I say that to her, and the clerk laughs, and he tells me, he just jumps in and he says, it was doing well over in the American comics one, but we thought it might work better with the BD. We moved it over there, and all of a sudden it started selling better. And it is interesting how I imagine there are certain genres and certain story types that if you produce it in the right way, it will take off with the BD audience, because they're like, yeah, this isn't just a comic. This is something that works for me.
Yeah, and this is also those kind of experience. They are done by many and several, and I hope so. More and more retailers. They for instance, Saga won't be in a US comic book section, but they will try to put it with the sci-fi, in fact, European bande dessinée, just to get, in fact, people to read without even knowing the origin, the US origin of the content. That this is really for us important, because those books, they do, in fact, the US comic books, they do suffer, in fact, from this bad reputation, just getting spandex and superheroes.
It's interesting that stigma exists in both countries, though, where it's like comics are just superheroes, right? And like for both, that's the case. But before we get further, I actually want to bring up something that I think is kind of necessary groundwork for this conversation. First off, just for listeners, when we say comics, we're going to be talking about American comics. When we're talking about BD or bande dessinée, that is like a European format that's typically like oversized hardcover, beautiful, really great to look at art. And it is it or manga are the dominant form in France. And in terms of urban, I want to get a little insight into what urban is for listeners. The vast majority of listeners probably have no idea what urban comics is, which you work for and are the editor-in-chief of. We'll get into its background a little bit later, but how would you describe urban comics to listeners that aren't aware of the varying French publishers? Like, what do you all do there, and what's the focus on product-wise?
What is the essence of urban comics?
Yeah.
Easy. Without getting into the background, historic and all, I guess that we are just working to make the American comic book culture, just to get those books into as many hands we can. This is really what we want to do, and to just to select. Yeah, we do select a lot. We don't publish everything. We are the sole publisher of DC Comics in France for 10 years now, and we don't publish everything. This is, to me, the essence of what we are doing is to edit. So we do have to make choice, to stand by them, and to explain them, and we try to to educate. I don't want to be patronizing, but this is the way we have to do it. We will be we are a gentle teacher. We don't punish anyone, but we need, in fact, to add, in fact, those comments, introduction of characters, just for every book to be as much as accessible as they can. So yeah, we want to be that kind of publishing house.
And you also publish, I don't know if it's all of, but you also publish Boom and Image books too, right?
Yeah, we are not exclusive. The books, Boom Studio, Dark Horse, and Image, they don't have any exclusivity with any French publisher. So you can have books, Image comic books at Delcourt, at Panini, at Urban, which are the main French publishing houses for US comics. So no, we don't have this kind of exclusivity. So, but we do select a lot, and we are the proud and happy and lucky French publisher of Saga, for instance. It was really important for us to, once we did establish that we were going to do this hard work with all the DC legacy, just to build the DC legacy in France, because it was something that wasn't really done until I guess until 10 years ago. Not the way that we have been doing this, but we have this DC master agreement, but we do also, because we love comics and we praise the diversity of comics. We need, in fact, to publish other things other than DC. And for us, it was also a way to, now that Vertigo has closed down, we had successes with, for instance, Why the Last Man. And we didn't know that at that time that Vertigo was about to close, in obviously, but we wanted, in fact, to give our Why the Last Man readers the next book of Brian K. Vaughan, for instance. So that's why we pursue, in fact, those creators, because we are really, I guess, creator centered. Editorially, we try, in fact, to build, in fact, every time we can, the catalogs of a creator. Even if it's someone who has worked a lot for superheroes, we tend to put his name as big as, for instance, as Batman. That's why we have those kind of collection, like signatures collection, DC signatures, for instance, that the Grant Morrison's name is as big as Batman. So it's Grant Morrison presents Batman. We want, in fact, to the author, the creator, to be another point of entry. Because in France, and I guess in Europe, the concept and the notion of creator is really, it's driving a lot of attention for the readership. It's like a landmark. So at first we did explain that to DC. They weren't on board at first, because they literally told us that you've got Batman, you've got Superman, you've got all those legendary characters to sell. You don't need to advertise over the creators. It doesn't make sense. It was 10 years ago. Now the mood has changed a bit, and we are pretty happy about it. But so we do explain them that in France we do have this not worship, but we love, in fact, we love creators. So we wanted to pay tribute, in fact, because creators are the reason why those characters are still alive. So this is really something that really matters to us. So whatever the genre is, superhero, fantastic, or fantasy, or sci-fi, the dimension of the creators are really, it's central for us.
Well, and the really nice thing about that too is like a really great example of how this could work ideally for urban and for readers is James Tynion. James Tynion is somebody that you work with Nice House on the Lake. I'm sure you publish his Batman stuff. You have Department of Truth, et cetera, et cetera. You put James Tynion's name big on there. All of a sudden, like, somebody who jumps on board to Batman is like, what else does this guy have? And it's like, you see this big Tynion across there for Nice House. You pick up Nice House. You're like, man, this guy's really good. I got to read Something Is Killing the Children. Next thing you know. And that's one of the things that I think is interesting about it is, like, for you, if you sold Batman to Batman fans, that's great. But if you sold Batman to Batman fans and James Tynion comics to James Tynion fans, that is an audience splintering in two different ways, which is beneficial for you. It's beneficial for the publishers you work with, and it's beneficial for the creators as well.
And this is something that the retailers they totally got that, in fact, really really fast, and they were our best support by for us building this creator centered catalog, and they were the first, in fact, to present the books that we were publishing by authors on their table, just to thematize, in fact, this offer. So yeah, and we've been able also to get the trust, in fact, of those creators. It's just a relationship thing. First, when we began with Urban, we traveled a lot to meet the creators, to meet the editors, to offer our books. In fact, I still got this in mind, this picture of Geoff Jones getting his Geoff Jones present Green Lantern. So Geoff as big as Green. It felt like he was really proud, in fact, of this kind of book, and it was our best business card, in fact, to get those books into the hands of their creators. So we built, in fact, those relationship over the years, and now we are happy, again, honored and lucky to call those creators our friends. So it's another layer, in fact. There is a business, a professional, all that stuff, but we do tend, in fact, to like what we are doing and like the people that are doing that. No, it's as I used to say, there is no Monday morning, in fact, in comic book publishing.
Well, like one of the things that's really cool too is that, so you're talking about like Geoff Johns, he's getting this Green Lantern book, and like it's entirely possible at the point that you publish that, even though his Green Lantern run was in like the mid 2000s in the US, it's entirely possible that that run had never seen the quality of production that you guys put in. Because that's something, you know, for listeners that don't know, almost all, actually, the vast majority of what you do is like hardcovers. They're like big, beautiful hardcovers. Like you have the Nomad line, which is kind of digest size, more affordable, really nicely done still, but not like those pristine hardcovers. And it's interesting because when I've talked to creators about the productions that happen in other countries, particularly in France, they are just blown away by what they see, because it's just the production value is a completely different level.
We are, the fact that the children of this European culture, we have a say, in fact, that the quality equals, in fact, it has to be hardcover. This is the idea, the main idea that drives the French market. So hardcover is by default, and sometimes when I still remember the when we met Jason Aaron for the first time, we offered him the French Scab version. He said, "Oh wow, hardcover for Scab! This is something I never thought I would see one day." So it was, again, 10 years ago, and we were honored, but to witness, in fact, this kind of joy. But after that, Jason, it's like the default treatment. This is the very least, in fact, we can do, because when you're in France, hardcover are mandatory. So it's not a special treatment, sorry, but this is the way it is. But after that, yeah, we do tend, in fact, to get this kind of, to us, it's regular treatment. I totally understand that even seen from Italy or Spain or Germany, that this is quite a high-end treatment. But now we do observe that this in Europe, for instance, the Spanish editions, they are, to my taste, one of the best we've seen so far. So there is no competition between us and, for instance, ECC, but we do take a look at each other's editions in Europe. So yeah, no, it's a joy, in fact, to think about the best format. And this is also we've got the easiest place, in fact, the easiest position. We are publishing stuff that has been published between 70 and 1 year ago. So we do have this time to think about those kind of details. There is no rush. So, for instance, we try to come up with the best format. For instance, we resurrected the Batman Chronicles, or the Chronicles format, and then it's not hardcover, so we changed a bit our formula, but it was the best way, in fact, to handle those quite heavy books. It's a soft cover. It's Integra, which is some really nice binding. And yeah, I could make a whole podcast about Chronicles. I guess that we cover this topic at one point, but
Oh, I mean, I think the thing that I really love about Chronicles, so for listeners, Batman Chronicles is basically a series, annual collections of all of Batman's stories. And so, like, the one I looked at previously when I was in France was Batman Chronicles 1990 or 1988, Volume 1. And it isn't just Batman in a book. It's Batman and all of the appearances, like Suicide Squad number 10 is in there, Batman the Killing Joke is in there, and basically it has it all chronologically, so you can buy this book and you can just read all of Batman's stories. And the thing I really like about it, and the thing that I think is really appealing to it for non-typical comic or superhero comic readers, my wife loved this, was in between each issue, you contextualize with a write-up where this story falls and why it's important. So you don't just drop in there and just like, why am I reading a Suicide Squad issue? You're like, this is an important issue for this reason. Also, I want to point out for listeners that like these volumes are like, this is like I think if I looked it up recently, it was like 576 pages. It was really big. And it's €35 or about 45 or 40 US dollars, which is insane. Like in US, it would be like $125 and it would be a giant monstrosity that you would like use to beat invaders into your home. But I love that stuff. And I think it speaks to something that I wanted to bring up, which is like one thing that really struck me during my visit to France was that unlike in the United States, it feels like the broader French populace really loves comics in all its forms. There's a lot of respect for it. It isn't like, it isn't kind of like a secondary art or something for kids or whatever. It's just another way you can tell stories. And there's a lot of, it's not like people are jumping on board. A lot of them have already jumped on board. I'm curious as to like, what is like the French market like for comics? Like what's the breakdown in terms of what sells, where the interest lies amongst the readers of the varying forums? It seems like there's just a lot of love there, and it's expressed in a lot of different ways.
You mean not only for the US comics on the French market, but
just kind of everything. I mean, just because in my mind, and I know that this is something that cuts both ways. In my mind, it should be, in theory, easier to sell somebody on American comics if somebody already likes sequential art as a form. And that's something France does. I know that art also has its own hardships to it, but it seems like, I mean, I guess my question for you is there a really high adoption of comics amongst readers in France?
I do think so. Yeah. If I remember my own childhood, I don't remember any house or friends of my parents and all that didn't get any books or any comic books, bande dessinée at all. So they were always bande dessinée around me. But my mother, she likes, in fact, to read bande dessinée. She's not a fond of bande dessinée reading, but it's in the culture. I guess that there is no. It's like you've got a TV, you've got bande dessinée also. It's the same level, in fact, of and some readers and some houses that are just casual readers. They don't go to a comic book shop once in a month, but they do. Everyone has read at least once an Asterix or Tintin or Lucky Luke or those big European classics. And now with the manga, I guess there is another kind of regeneration, in fact, that their very own classic books won't be maybe Lucky Luke or Asterix, but maybe Naruto or One Piece. But yeah, it's definitely in our DNA, and I guess that this is this kind of curiosity and attention to bande dessinée that makes the French market the second market for any kind of bande dessinée. But first, obviously, for the French bande dessinée, but we are second for manga and second for US comics.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Con season is among us, and the excitement can be felt on Zoop. July continues the fully funded Stardust, the Super Wizard anthology featuring an all-star creator lineup including Mike Allred, Francesco Francavilla, Jeff Parker, Pete Woods, and more. The fully funded La Bornquena, Volume 1 hardcover from Edgardo Miranda Rodriguez, as well as new projects from Glenn Bray, Paul Allore, Stack Deck Press, Tripwire Magazine, and coming later this year, Howard Chaykin's first foray into crowdfunding. It takes less than 30 seconds to sign up, and the e-commerce style checkout is easy and intuitive. Add multiple rewards and add-ons into your cart, provide some info during checkout, and you're done. No confusing additional steps in finalizing your pledge, and no post-campaign surveys. And of course, the creators appreciate your support. For creators looking to crowdfund your project, Zoop is currently open for submissions. Email them at hello@wearezoop.com to start a campaign. And now, back to the show. It is really interesting to think about that because America is like manga crazy right now. But Debe Oki, the manga journalist not that long ago, had tweeted about how, I'm trying to remember. I think the US market is like half the size of France's market for manga. And it is kind of amazing, like, to think of the fact that, like, France isn't just big in BD. France is big in like everything. It's always kind of number two. It just it paints this like picture of like a very comic crazy market. But, going back for you, I'm kind of curious. You work primarily in American comics and kind of curating them and finding like the right fits in the market and everything like that. How did you first like start reading American comics and like get into the comic industry? Like, was that always, were both of those things a draw for you, or is this kind of like a fateful rise to this position you're in?
I guess that for everyone who ends into publishing, it's there is always at the core of what we are doing, there is always at least an interest or a passion for the book itself. This is a very generic answer. For a more personalized answer, I would say that my first memory, like conscious memory of reading a comic book or a Batman book, it was The Killing Joke. That was in fact published by J'ai Lu, which is normally a literature publisher. But they did, by that time it was in 1982, they did try to publish bande dessinée. So it was Achille Talon, Gaston Lagaffe, and The Killing Joke. It was published under a really little format, just like this. I'm just showing you those kind of editions. But it was the way that we think about Nomad was just a retake, in fact, of those books that did have quite a success when I was young. So it was this way that I really went into US comics. Before that, I was reading when I was 5. Well, I was more looking at the picture, but Gaston Lagaffe and Asterix. So there was always this curiosity about bande dessinée. My uncle was really fond of US comics, especially, but bande dessinée in general. He has like the most impressive collection I knew by then. So I ended up go to his place, not to watch the TV. He had this all day cartoon channel at one point, but I did prefer, in fact, to invest his book section and bookshelves, and that's how I've read Mandrake or the Tarzan, or so the Phantom of the Bengal. So it was really my formation as a US comic book readers, and I did my scholarship. I did become a US comic book reader when I was in Rennes, which was the city where I was a student, and there was this export retailer that he was importing US comic books in France. So we had floppies, basically, and floppies. Yeah, I did collect them. I guess I've done the whole Scat and whole. It was The Losers by Andy Deagle and Jock, which was my really first the first series that I really had to read every issues of it. So yeah, it's I always had this passion at heart, but being passionate is one thing, but to make a living out of it is totally another thing. So when I finished my studies, I went from philosophy to economics and political sciences. And web creation also. So I wanted to take every chance I could have to get into the publishing sector. So I did apply as an intern at Delcourt, and they did took me once, and then twice. They told me that you may stay in the area, because Delcourt, they were about to get their 20 20th anniversary, so it was a big thing, and they were in fact developing a lot, and they did need in fact fresh blood, I guess. So, and this is how I've met Thierry Mornay, who is the editor-in-chief of the US comics at Delcourt. We were publishing at that time the Walking Dead, Invincible, Hellboy, all the Star Wars by Dark Horse. So it was my first job. In fact, I began an intern and then assistant editor to the US Comics catalog of Delcourt for 7 years. It's a lot of luck. It's a lot of luck, but you have to provoke this luck and to seize, in fact, the moment and to be the right one at the right time. It's always difficult to seize and to feel that kind of momentum. But I did it. So yeah, the fact is, if you got something at heart, do everything you can, in fact, to succeed. Just for the point of not regretting anything. Even if you didn't succeed, at least you did try, because yeah, you have to.
I do think it's interesting, your story and then also Urban's story, because Urban came in 2011 and it was in a market where, at least as far as I understand, Delcourt was publishing US comics in France. Panini was there already as well. And obviously there was a lot of other things going on there, but it was a market that was already pretty robust. And also American comics had, occasionally struggled to make penetration. Obviously The Walking Dead and Invincible and Hellboy probably did fairly well, but like not every book was Walking Dead. And I don't know. I mean, when you first took on the job in 2011, when Urban Comics was first launching and you were heading the whole enterprise, what was your thought process? Like, did you go in thinking that you and your team needed to find a way to like differentiate how you did things and try to do things in a slightly different way than the other publishers that were producing US comics in France?
I wish it would have been that educated or well thought, but no, the fact that I've been offered, in fact, this position, assistant editor, and it was a huge step up, in fact, from assistant to the editor-in-chief. So I had to think fast, I guess.
And learn fast, I bet.
And learn fast, but at first I was just like a super assistant editor. We were really a small team, so we had to do everything. Even if we are part of a big group, the Dargo group, which is huge because it's Dupuis, Le Lombard, Dargo, and Kana for the manga. So it's one of the main publishing house for French bande dessinée on a European scale. But building Urban was really just being like the American cousin, literally. So we were like, I was with Jan at first. We were two at the editorial, so we had to do everything, and it was it's an adventure, and this is something that was full of everything. It's quite difficult to describe the rush that we had, and also the chance we had to publish, US comic books in another way. I did struggle, in fact, to get in and to keep to still be on board reading comics with the way that the not Delcourt but Panini was publishing Marvel and a bit of DC, but not that much. So our will was for readers that may have suffered from those kind of publishing philosophy. We try to rewrite history and to begin from scratch, because it was easier for us to consider that DC was there was this legacy, in fact, to build from scratch, and this is what we do. In fact, just to go over again, we did build, in fact, those collections that were supposed to and their goal was to be the top shelves of every characters, and also to accompany with the text, and also we try to structure and to create a structure that wasn't there at first when the previous DC publisher, they did publish, in fact, DC stuff. It was mainly based, this is my take, and not everyone's take, but the DC books, they were published in French because they were pretty, they were nice, and the art was sensational. But I feel like the publisher by then, they didn't really care about the continuity and to build, in fact, this legacy. So we did have all the seminal publication, but you couldn't read, for instance, the No Man's Land in a Batman No Man's Land in continuity, or Nightfall before that. There was all this work, in fact, all those stories, and they were unpublished in France, even for Batman. So there was a lot of to dig up and to explain, and just to build as something quite coherent. So I guess that if we could, yeah, this is the way that we've done things differently than before. Just to be consistent, to be explicit a lot. The fact is that we wanted to, even if you take like a volume 2, your volume 3 of a series, that you will have in this book every information you need to understand what you are reading. It was really the main purpose, because I remember my own case, just reading a French edition of Identity Crisis, for instance, and I had to, in fact, to look at the copyright or the credits page to understand when it was published, what I should read next or before. It was a pain, and I used to do that with Identity Crisis, but before that there was no internet. So I'm old now by saying that, but there was no internet, so you were all by yourself. If you didn't have a friend who may have read all this content, you were just lost, in fact. And when you are lost, yeah, you just abandon, in fact. And we don't want people to abandon.
Well, and that's one of the things that I think is interesting, because that's a complete overlap with the American market and how things are here. Is just like, one of the first times I went into the first time I went into a comic shop with my wife, she asked a question that I think that could be asked in like 50 different ways about comics, which is, how do you know where to start? And that's like a very legitimate question. And I think it's interesting that it seems like previously DC's publications, and really just kind of everything in general, was published as stories in isolation as much as it was as a shared universe, in a way that you could kind of enjoy it. And it seems like you kind of, part of your approach for Urban was reframing it as like, if you like this Batman Nightfall thing, you're probably going to enjoy No Man's Land, and then Contagion, and this and that. I don't remember the order, but it's somewhere in there. But one thing I really loved about, one of the things I discovered when I was in France was we were in, God, where was it? It was in a shop in Aix-en-Provence. And we walked in there, and there was this amazing little like guide. I'm holding up my hands, and it's just like a little square. And if you pull it all out, it's a guide to reading Batman, and it has like continuity, and it shows how it all works. And it is a complete walkthrough on exactly what you need to read Batman if you want to read it in order. And like as soon as my wife saw that, she's like, "Why doesn't everybody do this?" I'm like, I don't know why everybody doesn't do this. It makes sense, because it makes reading comics easier. And I think that's one of the things that is really cool about what you and your team have been doing with Urban is you have two things that you can do as, this kind of new game in town that's been around for 12 years, is you can rethink how you can make these things easier for people to read. And you also can curate it so you are giving these varying books and these varying characters the best look, and make sure that when readers read something from Urban, it isn't just you're publishing everything. You're publishing the best of the best, and things that complement each other and make people like Urban's comics more. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and yeah, those guides, they were in fact the best tool we could, in fact, design for readers, but also for retailers, because they are our best ally. So we needed, in fact, to have them, and those how to survive guide, in fact, into the DC Comics universe. Yeah, they were quite mandatory, and they are still. We've done this maybe 8-7 years ago, and we are updating every once, I guess, once a year. We do update each one of those Batman guides and Superman guides, and yeah, and this is the way, I guess, we've structured, in fact, our offer. And now that, thanks to those guides, the inner structure, or maybe the transparent structure that we developed at first, it's more and more visible now, and we got it did come to fruition, in fact, and people now they are. I saw this online, and it's the best rewarding observation we can do as a publisher, to see other readers explaining what we are doing to new readers. and say, okay, my fact is my job is done. If I've been able, in fact, to be clear enough uh, uh, towards the retailers, then towards our core readers, and now those readers, they are educating, in fact, new readers. That's it's a very a positive circle. It's I won't get emotional, but yeah, it's part of the joy of this work, because when you see it can be like an editorial line, or the choice of the books, or the a way to communicate, when you are in sync and when you are getting understood, when this gut feeling you have, because publishing is only this, it's just a gut feeling that's just waiting to be confirmed or not, and usually it's not. But when it does, when there is this echo towards retailers, towards readers, that just validates what you thought was right, yeah, it's a relief because I can do that longer. But no, it's so rewarding.
I am a very big fan of France's comic shops. I think they're incredible. You know my feelings about Oppum Boppum. I think it's like one of the greatest shops in the world. I'm curious as to, do you talk to shops fairly regularly about what they need, how you could help make those products easier for them to sell? Because it seems like your Batman guides and your Superman guides and things like that, they're not designed in a vacuum. It seems like you're designing them with intent to make their lives easier. Is that the case?
Yeah, that it was a tool, in fact, designed for them, and basically this is what it is, tools. And it's even, you can hide it in the back, in your back pocket.
Oh,
You
I
just
did.
say hopla, take a quick look, and then go advise your customer. No, it totally works. And yeah, we talk a lot, and we meet the retailers a lot to get their feedback. And usually I would say that 1 out of 3, we miss, in fact, their needs, because we do develop things, but sometimes the feedback, it's not in sync with what they really need. So it can be really frustrating to think about a tool that is not totally adapted to their shops, because there are so many types of French comic shop, as you may have seen. We are diverse, and some, they are they got their books in alphabetical orders, though ordered by genre, ordered by creator. So everyone can do whatever they want, but we do have to think about tools that will fit into those into these various categories. So sometimes we do miss a few of those tools, but the last we've got, I guess it was pretty appreciated. It was a catalog we've done for our 10 years anniversary, that was segmenting all of our books, so superheroes and all the Image and Dark Horse books, into genre. And for us, even sometimes if it's Batman books, usually it's more of a thriller or a noir crime story than a actual superhero. So we had, like, for instance, Gotham Central. It was in the noir and thriller part of this catalog. And this way, we wanted to prove, in fact, the retailers that even if it's US comic books, it can be fantasy, it can be sci-fi, it can be adventure. And we had this really thick catalog. It was maybe 200 or 300 pages. And we had a huge success and a huge positive feedback from the retailers. It was another tool, in fact, to make them more familiar with the way that we promote, in fact, comics as a diverse bunch of genres.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. It's Bad Idea, and Bad Idea is, once again, doing something? They're telling you that only you can save digital comics from Amazon, as the Renegade publisher is kickstarting a new digital comic from David and Maria Lapham, Scorpio Steele, Bill Crabtree, and Dave Sharp called The Ends. They're describing it as a quote-unquote comic book masterpiece, with the whole endeavor even coming with a pro edition featuring work from other creators. Wait, Bad Idea is doing digital? I thought that wasn't their thing. You might be wondering. You were correct. But apparently, you are no longer so. The Ends is coming to Kickstarter, but also digital at some point in the future. Sounds like a bad idea. It also sounds like Bad Idea. We'll see what it entails when it hits, but Bad Idea, doing its thing on Kickstarter once again. And now, back to the show. You guys do really great work at working with them, but also I just want to give a quick shout out. So there's this shop, Library Experience in Lyon, and there's this book. I'm holding it up, no one can see it, so it's terrible podcast etiquette, but basically it's like a magazine that they release each quarter, and in it, like, it has a breakdown on what you can expect from upcoming releases and everything. And for example, within this, there's a breakdown in pages from Nice House on the Lake. I think it's volume 2, I want to say. And then also The Passageway, the Jeff Lemire and Andrea Sorrentino release from Image, well, from Urban. Both of them are Urban releases. And it is interesting because those materials are extraordinary. Like, you would never see those in the US, understandably. I mean, like, there's so many things going on. There's a lot for them to do. Producing quarterly magazines of high quality are probably not the most rewarding things, but it's so heartening to see those things. Unrelated to that, I actually wanted to talk about your approach to kind of curating and developing each of your releases, because you have an interesting position where for DC, you have basically their total history to like work with. You have the ability to go after books that you believe in from Boom and Image and Dark Horse and et cetera, the free agents for the American market. And you can do that and design a line that is collaborative with one another and will make people want to read more comics and discover new things from creators that they love and books that fit together. But you can also think about how you package them in a way that fits new audiences with like the big format that you're talking about, or like with Nomad, the smaller digest size, lower price one where you can get like Crisis on Infinite Earths for like €6.99 or whatever it was, which is absurd to me. You have a lot of history. You know this stuff. You've talked to shops. What is your approach to kind of curating your line and then also finding the right ways to package them? Like, does it really like, I don't know, I imagine it really just depends on the project, but you also have to think about your line as a whole, I imagine too, right?
Yeah, I think the way that I see Urban is that we are just a generalist publishing house. In fact, we do not we are well known as the Batman, the French Batman publisher, but we are so much more than that. So I would say that the majority of our income comes from DC. It's the superhero, just feed everyone in the team, but the joy that we can have, in fact, to be able to open up and to open our catalog to new creators. And sometimes it's relapping, in fact, when we are publishing books from it's the other way around, but we've published Do a Powerbomb by Daniel Wynne Johnson, but before that we did publish is a Wonder Woman Dead Earth. So to us, it's just like connecting, in fact, the same kind of audience and offering them, just like I was saying at first with Why the Last Man by Brian K. Vaughan, just to lure this readership to Saga and the other way around. So we always had, in fact, this back and forth to offer the most complete view of one author. We are publishing. We've published a year ago Layla Star, for instance, but today we are also publishing one of the very first graphic novel of Ramvi. It's Graffiti's Wall with Anand Erka.
Amazing book.
Yeah, and but to publish the alpha and the omega of someone's career at one point. We did the same when we did publish the Punk Rock Jesus by Sean Murphy years ago. And we did also publish at the very same time the Off-Road, which was the first IDW graphic novel that he has done. So for us, we tried, in fact, to build this reputation by being the most complete. Obviously, we do edit and we do select, but when we trust and when we follow an author, we try to be as comprehensive as we can. But how I'm creating the whole thing, I'm not ashamed to say this, but it's basically we just reading a lot of comics, and we do love some more than others, and this is just our own taste. In fact, this is the taste of the whole team, and yeah, it's sometimes we have the luck to win the bidding competition for a series that we love, and sometimes we don't. But yeah, the consolation is that we know that the series will be published in French anyway. So yeah.
As an outsider, I kind of feel like you always end up with the books with the best art. And and also I want to say, like, one thing that I think is really great about what you do is that you put great consideration into representing the art in the best way. Like, in one hand, that's natural because these are hardcover books in like often slightly oversized formats, so you're going to get better looks at the art. But the other thing is, you published a black and white version of Do a Powerbomb, and that is
Mhm.
so cool. And we don't have that, and I'm so mad that we don't. It is so lame that you guys get it and we don't. Dang it! Come on.
And you know those black and white editions, they are our one of our best assets when it comes to meet a new artist, someone that we never met before. Usually in his shelves, on his shelves, we find those kind of black and white editions. The one that made a huge hit, I mean, not a commercial hit, but a recognition hit, was the Creature of the Night by John Polion that we
Mm-hmm.
published
Oh
both in
boy.
color and in black and white. And these books were, I guess that every artist that we've met since 10 years, they did ask, in fact, a copy. Jorge Jimenez, which was our younger artist, just was crazy about this kind of edition. So and I do remember and this is the way we do collaborate cleverly with DC. I do remember this time we were in the New York office of DC, and we crossed Dan Didio. He was just bringing under his arm, I guess it was the Batman Year One black and white edition, the French one. He said, "Hey, I just told your idea," and he was really happy about it. And then they've done this whole Batman Noir editions, which are just, in fact, our own edition, but this is their material, so that's fair. But the way that we do collaborate with this is that they get ideas from every international partners, and usually it's ours that are adapted to their market. For instance, the second book that we've published, so the first was Watchmen, the second one was the DC anthology. That is a book that we've created. Jan Graff was the writer, part of the team, assistant editor, but he was that versed into the DC culture that he has been able, in fact, to create and to gather those 10, 12 stories that were in fact meant to get you familiar with the DC universe. And this kind of DC anthology, Batman anthology, Superman anthology, it was a content and a book that has been adapted into German, into Spanish, into Italian, into Korean also. So we do have this. So, and it all comes from this French creation, recreation, because we didn't create anything. But it's the flexibility also of DC that allows us, like, to play with their content. We do enjoy this kind of freedom.
You're kind of like a test kitchen for them in some ways,
Yeah.
where they're like, you're experimenting and doing your stuff. You're like, oh, what if Crisis on Infinite Earths was, the entire 12 issue series was like in a tiny, in a digest for like a low price. All of a sudden, like, everybody wants it, or Kingdom Come in the same volume.
We did develop, like, for those kind of crazy ideas, but when you are talking with people that just got the same will, in fact, to develop things, we can create those kind of combo. For instance, we have this line Urban Games, which are books coming from video games backgrounds, just video games. And so we had this it was the Batman Arkham Asylum adaptation by Paul Dini, and it was Carlos Donda, I guess, the artist. And we had this deal with Warner, because Warner is still a huge partner of us. Day one, we were building Urban Comics. Day two, we were into the French office of Warner. So really fast, we had those talks, just adding the PC version of the video game into our book. It was something that has been done several times, right? And it was a huge hit. Same thing with the Injustice. We did publish the third volume and the PC version for 20 euros.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that also with anime, the adaptation of Dark Knight Returns or Batman Year One. We did, in fact, make this combo, the book plus the game or the anime. So, and it was something that to me was so genuine and so natural, but it never has done before. And then DC took the idea and just adapted to their markets, which it's cool.
I mean, it's probably pretty flattering. I do think it's interesting though, because like with your nature as like, I labeled a test kitchen, it does seem like it behooves you to kind of experiment and try new things to see like if you can make an impact on the market. Because like one thing that really excited me that you told me about when we had lunch was that you and your team took Jeff Lemire and Andrea Sorrentino's The Passageway, and you're like, what if we made this super big so it had to be racked with BD, right? And so I think it's interesting where you're not just thinking about like, how do we make this look good? You also think about like, how do we make this more discoverable or more accessible as a product rather than just like, how do we publish this because we said we're going to publish it? It seems to me that your team is really trying very hard to find the right answer and the right solution for each project in the market.
Yeah. We don't push paper. It's something that is just the opposite. We really try to curate, to select, and even if we have to sometimes to rework a lot the covers, for instance, to make them match, in fact, with our market expectation or what we think that are our market expectations. For instance, the Bone Orchard Mythos, the Passageway, and the Thousand Black Feathers. We had to rethink the covers because Andrea he created I guess totally functional and really arty cover for the image edition, but we felt that it was too arty, in fact, for our own market. And
like too abstract, or what do you mean?
yeah, there was a concept, but it was too conceptual. We need, in fact, to be not more basic for the French readers, but I guess this is the part where I can't explain it in a other way, that a gut feeling that those kind of covers, they don't really match with the way that a French reader would just pick the book. In fact, it would keep him at distance. So we try to think and to make those covers, in fact, more European niche, I guess. Mm-hmm. So, and for if you take a look at the French edition of the Bone Orchard Mythos books, the fact is that we took actual interior pages, then we turned them into covers. They are not meant to, but they were that strikeful and that powerful that we've been able, in fact, to turn them into covers. And we do that for quite a lot of books. In fact, I've just some weeks ago, I have a Substack newsletter when I explain, in fact, the way that we are working, and it's a huge place to exchange, in fact, with the readers. I love that. And one of the topics that I developed a bit lastly was the covers, in fact, the way that we choose covers and why sometimes we do change a lot, like radically, the look of the books. For instance, again, it's not podcast friendly, but this is the cover for the Duo Power Bomb, which is totally not the US version, but it was.
For listeners, it's basically like a front and back cover combined to form a single image of the main character getting punched in the face. And like that is the Duo Powerbomb image. It's killer. I did want to point out the one that really stood out to me. One thing I really like about the French comic shops is that they really put books face out. And for listeners that don't know what I mean, face out means literally what it sounds like. It means that the cover is facing out instead of just spines. And when you can actually see the cover, there's like a hook in you. You can really feel it if the art is striking enough. And the one that really got me was the cover that Dustin Nguyen did for Little Monsters Volume 1, which I'm showing you. It is different than the cover for the American market, which it's Dustin Nguyen. I'm not going to like lament like the quality of his cover because it's all so good in America. But the one that you published is so much more striking. And when I saw that, I think I was at, I'm forgetting the name of the shop. It was in Lyon. And when I was in there, Comic Zone, when I was in the Comic Zone, I was walking by and I saw that and I just stopped and took a picture because I was like, this is an incredible cover. Like it just pops off the stand. And like, it's interesting because if I went to my shop, all the books would be spine, you just see the spine, so it wouldn't really matter. But for you, it seems like covers are unusually important because of that face out nature, because you got to stand out when people see that cover. And covers almost have a different intent in France than they do in America, I think.
Yeah, and it's yes, standing out is a way to survive because the market is so crowded that you need it to make a statement for every cover that you are publishing. So, and there has been some kind of a debate for the Duo Power Bomb cover among the readers, and also some they just hate this cover, but I just answered them that the work that Daniela has done for every covers of the series is tremendous. We did feel that we needed, in fact, to make a statement, not to have a really detailed or too over detailed cover on the stands. We just had to the white noise, in fact. So we needed, in fact, to get those masses, this impactful, obviously, cover, just to make a statement with this really strong orange. So this is a book that you won't be able to miss. The same thing with the Little Monsters. You can't be wrong if you are using red, white, and black. The fact is, it's primarily because your body react, your eyes, like in the primitive time, it does react, in fact, to red, and obviously red and black. This is it's always a win, in fact. So we do integrate those kind of things.
Did you publish Paper Girls?
Yes.
It reminds me of Paper Girls covers that Cliff Chang did for the first volume of the series, the single issues, where it's like, it's so, the simplicity and the color choices is really what makes it stand out. But I just have a few more questions before wrapping up. I had a question from a creator, Darcy Van Polgies, the writer of Little Bird over at Image, but unfortunately, I believe it was at Glenot. He asked, we know and talk a lot about the shifting tides of American comics, but he's really interested to know if and how the market is evolving in France. Like, does it feel like there is an evolution going on right now in terms of what's working and kind of how people are perceiving comics?
We had, like, I guess the world did this when you are working in publishing. The last 2 years were a blast. In fact, commercially speaking, we had huge sales driven by the manga, obviously, and this is something that is tending to get more in sync with what was before, in fact, the pandemic. So we are back into the 2019 standards. So we do have some complaints, in fact, from retailers that we see less and less people in our shops and all, but it's just going back to normal. So we did have this huge hit and this big rush of interest for bande dessinée, driven by manga, and also I guess that this audience, not everyone will stay a reader, either a manga reader or US comic book readers or bande dessinée reader. But I do think that they got the virus inoculated, in fact. So I guess that there will be, even if there is a fraction of those millions of readers, it will be a really good sign, in fact, for the industry. So I do think that all the manga phenomenon, to me, it's good news. And I know that sometimes manga readers can be looked as not conservative but exclusive to what they are doing. But I do think that they will age, they will grow, and they will find, in fact, they will try to, if they like what they've read, they will try to find something maybe more diverse, but something else. And I do think that with the manga, they have been able to develop an habit of reading. Just be in a comic book shop even once a month. This is huge for someone who was just not used to do that, or never. So I do think that there is a really upside, in fact, to these dramatic times, and now we have to adapt, in fact, to go back to normal, to select, because we can't overflow, in fact, the market. It's not the way we want to proceed. So no, I'm pretty optimistic always, because otherwise I wouldn't just get up in the morning. But no, and specifically speaking for DC Comics or Urban, I do think that James Gunn and the way that he will develop the cinematic DC universe in 2025, I'm really optimistic about this, having this creator at the reign, in fact, of everything that what it should be, in fact, the main inspiration for the superhero genre, and the liberty that he will have, and the cleverness that he has been able to play already with the different genre, from the space opera of the Guardians, or something more funny with the Peacemaker. So I do think that this conjunction of having James Gunn at the head of this thematic development, plus but I do hope that it will bring a lot of success to DC, and then they will be able to hire back editors and assistant editors and creators, and just to having this positive will, in fact, and just to rolling the dice again, and just to bring more and more quality to what they've done, because the potential is here. And I do think that, yeah, James Gunn would be maybe, in fact, the guy to ignite the attention again. So I'm pretty positive.
This is a quick aside. Do you, when you know that there's like the Flash coming out, or like the Suicide Squad when James Gunn did it, do you time releases, new versions, or anything like that for that, or is that not kind of your focus?
It really depends on the character. For Batman, we do have a lot of content, in fact, to promote. So that's quite easy. Aquaman, sometimes we scratch our heads, in fact, to find the correct, the adequate content. And sometimes we just give up. When we have like a Black Adam or a Shazam movie, we don't have any content, in fact.
I mean, it is interesting because you think about the Robert Pattinson, the Batman movie.
Mm-hmm.
Batman Year One, easy sell.
Yeah.
Easy sell. But I mean, like, for a lot of them, it's not as easy of a sell. It's like, what is the one iconic Black Adam volume? And that's not me disparaging the character or any of the efforts anybody has done. It's just like, Batman's got a deep library of like instant like Batman the Long Halloween, a billion, Batman the Dark Knight Returns, like easy books that you're like, if you want a good Batman story, boom. And that is one of the things that I think is kind of interesting and difficult about the DC back library, and by nature your back library is like, it's easier to sell Batman because Batman's got a lot of like really easy jumping on points, because there's just a lot of great one and done stories. I do think it's interesting though, like what you were talking about with, like, I think sometimes people within comics, not everybody, but some people look at manga in almost a combative way. It's like they're taking away from our sales, or like they're doing this, like blah, blah, blah. I actually think the right way to look at it is an opportunity, because as you were saying, it's bringing in all these new readers. And like one thing that stood out about that Do a Powerbomb cover, and really Do a Powerbomb as a whole, is like, you look at that cover, that's something that would appeal to a manga reader, maybe more than a comic reader. And the interesting thing about that is, I think that framing it as an opportunity where all these new readers come on from manga, and then positioning your books is similar to what you're doing with creators, where it's like, if you can get somebody to jump from My Hero Academia or, I don't know, Demon Slayer over to Do a Powerbomb because that art just totally rules and it just has got the energy you want out of your comics, you might create a new reader forever.
Coming back to Little Monsters again, the cover of our first volume did in fact attract this manga readership. We do have retailers that had this feedback that they never seen this audience taking a US comic books into their hands. But thanks to the cover, when you see this little vampire girl with the red moon behind her on a white background, it's just and the fact that it's all in grayscale, is in gray tones on the interior art. So yeah, it does match, in fact, a lot of common interest for manga readers. So yeah, definitely the Little Monster, and I do think that Do a Powerbomb could ignite the same kind of interest.
Last question for you, and this is getting to you to put your eye elsewhere. I want to get your perspective on the American market as a whole, particularly the direct market, because, I mean, obviously the markets are considerably different, but as an outsider who works with the material, I imagine you would have kind of an interesting perspective on this. Like, what are your thoughts about the approach to that market as a whole? Like, does it seem extraordinarily foreign to you because of its single issue focus and all the variant covers and things like that? Or is it just like the other side of the coin you happen to work in?
Yeah, our two markets, they do differ a lot. No, I totally understand the need, in fact, for the direct market to keep the singles out, just to get this first amount of money and then I guess this is a TPP that would get the money back, in fact, for the editor. But yeah, sometimes to me but it's not, there is nothing original on my take. And so sorry, I guess this is something that every listeners have already think about, but the grinding, the events, a new events every 2-3 months, it's not a point of entry anymore. It's just all those first issues and all. To me, it doesn't work. What works, in fact, and is way more capable of driving a new audience is the Black Label format. And to me, this is the best idea that DC had. And it was John Cunningham, I guess, who was the head of sales of DC 10 years ago, or maybe less, maybe 5 years ago, who co-created, in fact, with Mark Doyle, the Black Label concept, just to bring back, in fact, the recipe that made Batman Long Halloween, or even Watchmen, or to get this formula that built the legacy of DC in the 80s and those evergreen successes. And so just John told us that he was quite proud and vocal. John is vocal, but he's really clever to me in this take, in fact, to analyze what made those books successes. So it's a it's an out of continuity story. It's a complete story, but it's also a creator story. This is even an original creation. There is in French we say une œuvre d'auteur. So it's really done. It's not commissioned by a publisher. It's something that the author, they really wanted to make, in fact. So they pour a lot of themselves, and this is to me the way that a book can be that can get, in fact, this lifelong vitality, in fact, because the talent and the personality of those creators, it's still alive. It's still burning into those books. And the way that the Black Label was mimicking this formula, it's just working a lot. We have this Batman White Knight, which is, like, I guess now more than 80,000 copies sold in France.
Wow!
So I do think that on the American market scale, it's way more, but it's huge, and we have in France. But I do think that it's the same thing for the US market. We have new people who are just coming to Hellblazer thanks to the Tom Taylor's take on the Black Label, on his Black Label book, or Aquaman by Ram V that we just has been released this week. It's not frightening anymore to read superhero books or DC books, because it's just a one-time experience. If you're not into it, you will know it from the beginning. And if you are into it, you have like decades of reading waiting for you. So yeah, to me, this point of entry that is the DC Black Label, I think that DC, and I know that they are capitalizing on it, but yeah, to me, this is where you have to put all your talents right now.
I do think, building off of what you're saying, it's interesting how a lot of what's produced in the direct market feels kind of fleeting in nature, where it like comes and goes and it doesn't really have a major impact. But one of the things that's nice about Black Label is what you're talking about, where there's a bit more permanence to it, where you read something like Wonder Woman Dead Earth, or you read something like Wonder Woman Historia, and next thing you know, when somebody's like, how do I want to read a great like standalone story about Wonder Woman's world, you have two distinctly different flavors that you don't really need any background for. You can just jump straight into it, and they both absolutely are amazing. And, I mentioned before about how, like, when the Robert Pattinson movie was coming out, you had all these easy books to pitch. I feel like John Cunningham and Mark Doyle's intent with Black Label of like building something that rebuilds those evergreen hits and starts bringing those back in, that's something that we need more of, because like if DC has this new library of evergreen books, then you have that library, and then everybody has that library, and then it starts spreading and everything. And I don't know, I'm a very big fan of Black Label, not in the same format, but I personally would very much like to see an oversized version of Peacemaker Tries Hard whenever it comes out over at Urban, because that is a really good comic. Anyways, I have kept you for much longer than I said I would. Francois, thank you so much for coming on the podcast to talk about everything you're doing at Urban Comics. It's so exciting, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And as we were talking just before being on here, so I did try my best, in fact, to get like something understandable, despite the really really good night we had with Ram and Felipe last night. So I did my best.
You did great. You did great. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with Urban Comics Editor-in-Chief François Hercouet. You can find Hercouet on the Urban Comics News Substack and his work in Urban Comics Releases. Big thanks to Deanna Chapman, who stepped in to edit this podcast once again. If it sounds better than it usually does, it's because of her. Love Off Panel and want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel. And when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast, as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site, Sketched, at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by following it on Twitter and Instagram at @sketchcomic or following me at @slicefriedgold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Cancel Comics, Scott Place, Darcy Van Polgeest, Kevin Bides, Travis Schmeiser, Tom Evans, Natalie Mockery, Reed Beeman, Kelly Sudaconic, Max Wood, Jeremy Lambert, Brian, Matteo Ciccati, Chris Doré, Nir Levy, Dennis Hoffman, Jason Hussa, Kieran Gillen, Jonathan Kent Uratam, Henry Johnson, Django Boren, James Tynan IV, Chris Langford, Jason Wood, Tom Peachy, Ben Damstead, Rom V, Nick Walker, Patrick Coyle, Isaac Oren, Scott Carpenter, Rent Arb Studios Comics, Capes and Tights Podcast, Klaus Vandeven, Brian, Summit Industries, Jack Mulqueen, Kyle, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Canadian by Proxy, Bradley Rader, Carl Troy, Brandon DePills, Patrick Brower, Declan Chavez, Dan Garino, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, Nick Bennett, Birdcage Comics Cafe, Susanna Polo, Reed Hinckley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Stephen Hall, Philip Myra, Chris Pachalo, Torrin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Wallace Comics and Books, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Ryanwan, Vita Ayala, Akil, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Nick Polito, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogart, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Carl McMahon, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Mark Abnett, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Wolfpack for letting me use their song Outro as the show's opening theme, and to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's outro and ad music just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.